Welcome to the Beat the Banks podcast. I'm Kyle Fuller, and I'm in the studio today with my younger brother, Joe Fuller. And today we're going to be having a conversation about how to create your future family letter, which should be a document and an exercise you work on with your family. And the purpose of that letter is really to instill your beliefs, your values, and your principles around money that will be passed on to the future family. So it sounds, what it is it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a letter that we wrote for our future family. And, we worked on this, Joe, for months and months and months, really because what you and I are building right now for our family is literally an empire. And without the proper letter, beliefs, guiding principles that are attached to that amount of wealth, the average family will never be able to perpetuate that wealth past a second or third generation without a document like this that is in support of that wealth. So let's dive into this and let's talk about this exercise that we went through that is in perfect relationship with building a family banking system.
Absolutely. I love it. And, it's definitely always an honor to be on the podcast and to be here, especially with you, Kyle. So you've always been a leader in our family. And so I think one of the things that helped inspire this was some of the core books we read here at Factum and just that long-term thinking, but then also the principles of not only wealth building, but building relationships over time and setting expectations. I think about the time that we were creating this was about the time we were going through, it was my wedding time, right? So Jenna and I, my wife, were discussing kind of what we wanted our future life to be. And so that kind of created our little Joe and Jenna family letter. And then Kyle was like, let's take that a step bigger. Let's do the Fuller family future family letter. And so that's kind of where that idea was created and founded from, for what principles and what guidelines do we want to be known by, but also what do we want to live by, right?
And, when we were doing this exercise, let's get into first, what is the document? It's all it really is a letter with our values and beliefs for the next generation. Simply put, that's what it is. And so when we're reviewing this letter, and I've got it pulled up right here, when we take a step back and we say, okay, what's the desired outcome of our future family letter? You might have heard this be called like a family constitution, a legacy letter. It's some type of document that we envision hanging up in the family cabin, the family beach house, so that generations from now, when our great grandkids are growing up, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars at that point in wealth transfer, that they're like, how did this happen? Why are we this blessed? And they'll review that document and know oh, this is what it means to be a Fuller, right? And so, we believe in living into our max potential. So we have some guiding principles here that we want our family to abide by. Things like, becoming stronger together, something we call infinite thinking, intentional growth. These are all conversations around responsibility, consistency, self-mastery, long-range thinking, abundance, communication, relationships, trust, and loyalty. These are all things that were important to you and I that we put into a document. So we have some guiding principles. And then from there, we even took it a step further and created an acronym for what we stand for. So if someone were to say, well, oh, you're a Fuller. Well, we want our kids and our future grandkids to understand what that means. It's not just I'm part of the Fuller family. It means that we're future focused. We want unstoppable growth. Love your fellow man, lead at a higher level, empower others, realize your max potential. That was the acronym we came up with for being a Fuller. And then we have those guiding principles. And past that, we wrote a vision in all 5 areas of life, because a conversation, an idea that we've both loved, is the idea that life includes 5 areas: spiritual, personal, family, financial, and your occupation. And if you want to wake up and enjoy life to its fullest potential, you have to create abundance in all those areas. So after we had the guiding principles down, what does it mean to be a Fuller? We started working on the information that we would want the next generation to have. So in their spiritual life, we wrote out some thoughts and ideas that we both believe in that we want to instill into the next generation. We did it for the personal area of life, the family, the financial, and also for their occupation. Now there's lessons built into this letter, of what we will tolerate, what we will not, what we hope that they'll accomplish, what we expect them to do. All of these things that exist in this letter. And the reason that this document is so important is because most American families don't stay this close. Now, if you really start studying the wealth game, money, and you come across families like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, we hear the idea of having a family office. It's becoming a pretty popular idea. And what that family office is, our family has amassed so much money, so we need our own private people that handle our accounting, bookkeeping, taxes, real estate investments, money management, life insurance, umbrella policies, business insurance, you name it. That's really what a family office does. They work for a particular family. Now, what's interesting about that conversation is, why were the Rockefellers and Rothschilds in a position to have a family office in the first place? What preceded that? Knowledge and the idea of family banking. They were also enormous private family bankers. So when you take those things into account, you start to really see a system and a model that exists here. And so having your principles and what you believe in inside a document that will be passed on to future generations you have to have this, unless you want to be like everyone else. And that what most American families do is stay very separate when it comes to money. Everyone's working independently. And you and I have been very intentional with bringing our family closer together with money through a concept we call interdependence. And that's brought our family closer together. Now, this document is filling in all the small gaps.
Absolutely, it is.
There has to be a standard and some type of curriculum that we follow as a family so that people know when they're off track and when they're on track, what we will tolerate, what we won't tolerate, what we're going to incentivize. We want to incentivize certain behaviors in the family so that generations from now, those kids growing up, they know there's a huge responsibility on their shoulders because of what you and I and, Diana and Jenna are building right now for the family.
Right. And I think one thing, Kyle, is this exercise was built over probably 6 months to really finalize. Like, we spent a couple hours every other week, right? We would sit down all together, we'd talk about ideas, and then we'd go and we'd have creative sessions where we'd go think independently and then come back and bring those ideas back. And I think that's one of the key pieces that helped all of us start syncing our minds together, is because we all have this inherent desire to do good and to perpetuate that good. But if we don't write those things down, if we don't be creative in that process, then we're going to be missing certain pieces. And exactly what you said earlier is it's filling in the gaps of what we currently have to where we are going to be. And that's part of that imagination process, especially, when you're in this business long enough, everything becomes banking to you, right? It's all, how do you control what you have, your gifts and your talents, and then push those out to the world and then receive more back from it, right? That's the value exchange there. And so by doing this, we were pushing our gifts and our talents out, and now we have the roadmap to help the other siblings do the same. Now our kids are going to understand, okay, this is the value we bring as a Fuller, as a banking family. How do we perpetuate that even further? I mean, it's a simple, pure document, but it has so much power and so much relatability, because now when we review this, it's, holy smokes, this is, first and foremost, what it means to be a Fuller. But then we have all these responsibilities that we know and understand and we can put into writing that just makes it that much more clear for us.
And, it's been a document that we've been so excited about sharing that we now share it with a lot of other individuals that come to our wealth seminars. And so you really have to have this in place if you're going to build a family banking system. It's too important. It's the same conversation if someone said, I want to grow a really big business. Cool. Do you have a business plan written down? Not yet. All right. Well, there's issue number one, right? The same thing with the 5 areas exercise we do with clients and insurance agents. I want this type of life. Well, have you even written down what that life looks like? Well, not yet. That's probably your first step, right? So if we're going to spend all this time sacrificing, growing, learning, getting uncomfortable to build literally an empire, we should spend the time that it deserves to create a document so the family knows how this even happened. In most American families, you've probably heard it even at your age, Joe, the common phrase, and it exists in every culture. It's not just Americans, but in America, we call it shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve. And I think it's two generations or 3 generations, right? What that means is someone in the family makes all the wealth. They were the first catalyst, the first chain in that link that shifted. And then the next generation grows up with money. They probably lose some of that hunger and they end up squandering most of it. So their kids, the third generation, grows up and they have to start it all over again. I remember one of my early mentors teaching this principle to us about 10 years ago. And he said, across the world, in I believe it was China, he was saying that they call it rice field to rice field in 3 generations. You have one family that was out there breaking their backs in the rice fields, made the money, invested it wisely, were good stewards. The kids grew up with money, went to the city, squandered it all, and their children returned to the rice fields to start again where the family started it all. And what's interesting about this is we've lived through that. Not you and I in our generation, but our great grandpa, Blakely. He owned Blakely Gas, like 50 different gas stations. I remember seeing when I was a very young boy, a family video of him flying in on his own helicopter to like their ranch or whatever. Like that was a dude that had some serious money. And, had he had a document like this in place, those principles, his entrepreneurship would have been passed down more effectively. But more importantly, the framework that we've also created with our wealth pyramid, our investing conversation, our banking conversation, he ended up going bankrupt buying an airport that he knew nothing about. He knew gas stations. So had he had our investing framework that now we teach to our family, you don't invest in things you don't know and understand. It's called gambling. Mm-hmm. It's not investing. Had he had some of those things in place documented, he would have probably never made that decision, and things would have been very different for our dad and our grandpa growing up.
Right. And on that point, Kyle, it's so fascinating. The more I'm around the wealth building community, and I'd say it happens in every business and every walk of life, but we get to a point, I think so many people get so focused on their businesses that they never end up teaching their kids how to run a business, how to manage wealth, how to have these conversations with their kids. They focus solely on the business. And then later in their life, they're like, okay, shoot, well, I want to leave my kids something, but that relationship really isn't there. And so I think that's part of that shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves conversation is one generation knew how to work so hard and they knew and understood the economics of things. And then it wasn't passed down fully to the next generation because that stewardship and those conversations didn't exist fully. And so those kids were missing certain pieces of that wealth building conversation. And so having a document like this in place, it takes time. It takes consistency. You have to be relentless with critiquing it, making sure that the pieces inside of it are as clear as they can be.
Yeah.
But then that gives the kids after the following generations that exact roadmap. Okay, this is what I did to become successful. And if you mirror this, you will absolutely have an awesome life.
Yeah.
And I think part of that too is the person you're becoming always. And that's something you and I are very passionate about, right? Is always improving who we are. I guarantee you this document's going to change every couple of years as we sharpen our minds, as we sharpen our understanding of things. But for now, it is as close to awesome as it can possibly be. And it's going to keep getting more and more awesome as we continue to connect and grow as people, because our ideas and our imaginations are going to change. And we're going to say, shoot, we need to add some extra guidelines in here to make sure we're still on the right track, right? And that's the purpose of this document, is just keep us on the right track for generations.
And I wanted to touch on something you just said, because this is a living, breathing document. This will change and it will adapt as we grow and adapt. So when you are first doing this exercise, if you're listening to this episode, give it the time it deserves. We probably have 50 hours, somewhere around that mark in the document so far. Now, I think it's really good. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But, done is better than perfect. We have a document in place that can be shared. We have some guiding principles we are living by. People are starting to understand this language we're using inside our family. This will take time and consistency. There is a compound effect to this too, just like a whole life policy or a business or anything worthwhile in life. It takes some time and consistency. So we share this document at least every 6 months during our quarterly family banking meetings. Now, this year is very unique for our family, Joe, because this is the first year that you and I are sponsoring the first family retreat. So we're all going to California. We're renting some beach homes. This will be our first one. In the future, you and I wrote down for our vision of abundance in the family area that we're going to be doing a retreat, probably in Hawaii every year for 10 days. You and I will pay for the entire family to go so that we can teach this family banking conversation, but also the future family letter of what it means to be a Fuller. Now, as we start to navigate that and grow as a family, that document will shift and it will grow. Now, we've kind of built one overarching for the whole Fuller family. We've really spent the time to bring the entire family closer together, which is why we created one document. Now, you'll probably have a slightly different version for you and Jenna. Diane and I will have one that's probably slightly different for us. But overall, we have a very similar mindset when it comes to this stuff, which is why we wrote this one. Now, not everyone has to participate in it. That's the beautiful part of it. Everyone gets to choose, right?
Right.
We have siblings that are absolutely not living up to the principles and standards that we wrote in that document. That is their choice. But we know where we're taking our family, because I don't know if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, maybe their family's a bit like ours. Now, we have some habits, some behaviors that exist in our family that you and I don't want going to another generation. Yes or yes?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people resonate that when we teach this live at our seminars. Ooh, I definitely I don't like how this was done in our family previous, whatever it may be. This is your chance as a leader to instill those principles that you will tolerate and you will not tolerate going forward. And so there's a code of ethics here, right? And it's up to the individual family to be able to say, okay, here's where Kyle and Joe are taking the family. Are we going to attach our ships to theirs and go with them? Or are we going to go do our own thing? That's the beautiful part, is everyone has their agency. They can choose for themselves. But you mentioned something earlier about stewardship. And that's the missing piece that most people fail, I think, when it comes to building wealth. And here's how I know that. I was at a very high level mastermind recently. And like, when I say high level, I mean like in the last 10 years, I've always sought out the best rooms to be in. This is the best room I've ever been in by a long shot. The financial IQ in this room is so high. And it's led by a guy named Brett Tanner inside a group called Be Wealthy. And, he had this very high profile estate planner there. The guy was brilliant to listen to, very interesting, learned a bunch of stuff. But he said something that I disagreed with 100%. And he said, as you're mapping this out, you should start inviting your kids in to meet with your board of directors, by the time they're 18. And I looked at, David was with me at that one, and we both have young boys. And we both looked at each other when we said, if you're waiting until 18, you've missed the boat. You can't wait that long. Every year you wait, it's going to cost you. So, we're talking about money to my 2-year-old. My 2-year-old knows where to save money right now. If you ask Rich, he'll tell you policy.
Right.
You think about the programming that's happening at that level. So part of this conversation is not financial. It's the 5 areas. So we got to get the family incorporated with our beliefs, our guiding principles, all of those things. And that's a stewardship conversation. Has nothing to do with money. And there's a fascinating story of the Rockefellers and Cornelius Vanderbilt. They both were about the same time period. And Cornelius Vanderbilt at the time had more money than the U.S. Treasury, which is insane to think about. One family, right? It's like $100 million net worth, like way, way, way long ago, which is, crazy money in today's terms. And the Rockefellers spent so much time on stewardship and helping those family members understand what a family banking system was, how it was used, how they positioned life insurance in that conversation. All these things existed, but it did not exist in the Vanderbilt family. And here's a crazy stat. I think it was like 50 years after Cornelius Vanderbilt died, the first Vanderbilt heir was born broke. Isn't that crazy? How does that happen, Joe? And it's because it's a lack of stewardship, and it's a lack of systems and processes that exist. There's no future family letter attached to that wealth. And when you're raising kids or passing on wealth like that without the principles, kiss it goodbye. It is gone. And we'll hear this conversation a lot in the space of work that we're in. Why would I want to set up, all that? They're just gonna ruin it. Of course they will. If you don't lead them, there's some work that has to be done before this work happens, right? And that's a leadership conversation. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. A lot of our siblings, my boys, your future children, just because we might be okay at business and we did well investing, banking, all of these things, right? Growing this banking business. Does that automatically guarantee that my boys or your future children will want to get into business?
Not at all.
100? No, not at all. You see, they might grow up and say, I want to be an employee. That is awesome. If that's where they see themselves in their occupation area of life and that's what's abundant for them, do it. They might want to go work with a nonprofit their whole life. They might not want to get into the space of business that we're in. Now, that doesn't mean they won't be wealthy, because a lot of wealth is going to transfer to them. And they've got to follow this family banking system, our future family letter, to inherit a lot of that wealth.
Absolutely.
It will be protected. Now, here's the interesting thing about that is that's called family banking education. Banking and this flow of money affects everyone: employees, self-employed, business owners, and investors. No one gets out of the money game without that education. And that's what we focus on in this letter with our family banking conversation. So that no matter what area they choose in the occupation, financially, their foundation is so set. That's how you make the wealth perpetuate generation to generation. And that's why 2 or 3 generations from now, the stuff we're building, Joe, those kids are going to wake up with hundreds of millions of dollars of net worth. I mean, it's so big, and it will compound so fast. And if you study the Rockefellers, in contrast to the Vanderbilts, the last time I checked, I think every Rockefeller was a billionaire, but they're 6 or 7 generations deep with that. That takes a long-term commitment, a different type of thinking. Most people cannot think past the weekend,
Right.
which is a problem.
And yeah, I think one just key word that Kyle's mentioned a few times is the word wealth. This is wealth. This is not riches, right? This wealth is having the understanding of how money actually works. Riches is just having a ton of money, right? And there's a huge difference there of understanding how something works and just having a lot of it. And that's been one of the things that I've taken most from just being at Factum and watching and learning the last couple of years is there's such a huge difference between those that understand and implement and those that just do. And it's been such an eye-opening experience throughout all walks of life to see how this conversation really will change America. And just the savings component and understanding how wealth is built systematically over long periods of time, it is 100% a time and consistency game, but everyone tries to just chase those rates of return, that instant gratification, right? And that's the complete opposite view that we have to have. Is this is a long-term game with very time efficient and consistent savings behaviors and wealth habits more than it is the business, right? And so there's so many more aspects to wealth building than there is to actual riches.
I think that's a great point, and it's why we've been so relentlessly focused on the foundation. So we've been having our family banking meetings for years now, quarterly. And the last conversation, were we still talking our wealth scorecard and foundational savings principles?
Absolutely, we were.
We're going to stay right there for as long as it takes, right? Because that's the stuff that transfers. Your ability to invest, my ability to invest, run a business, whatever it is, will not transfer. Just because we're doing it doesn't mean they do it. But the foundational piece of wealth building, all the protection elements, the education, the awareness, the saving strategy, those are non-negotiable. Everyone has to have those. Now, I would say it's less of a sexy conversation. Like you said, everyone loves to talk rates of return and all that. But when you study some of the best players in the money game, which are commercial banks, and you look at how they analyze certain things and what they focus on, it's liquidity, it's protection, it's risk adverse, right? That's a different. Those are the ones that know how far you're going to go. Right? How strong is the foundation? Now, foundation, that word in itself has a lot of principles and meaning in it, and it's why we're spending so much time focusing on that with our family. The investing stuff, all that, to me, can be, summed up very easily. We all have unique abilities. Figure out what they are. Go use that to make money. Like, that's a different conversation. The wealth one, the foundation one, has to be built properly. You can't take any shortcuts with it. You have to build it right. You can't, if you speed up the process of laying a foundation for a home, or you jeopardize the materials that it was built with, Now you're running a risk of one storm comes by and wipes out that pretty home that was built on that foundation. We've seen it all the time. We saw it in our own family.
Right. Or worse, right? Generation 2 moves into that house and then it crumbles and they're like, shoot, this is what mom and dad left us with.
Right.
Why would they do that to us? And then it leaves a bad taste in all the siblings' mouths. And I think that's part of the reason having these documents in place, and especially that stewardship conversation, right? Because money is absolutely a tool, but when people see it as this magical entity that's going to solve all their problems, they're not. It's not the right mindset to have. Absolutely, it does help, but you see families torn apart by the legacy aspect of when their parents pass away. Brothers and sisters fight over the assets, right? They tear themselves apart at the seams because the foundations weren't set properly. And so as we develop these, and part of it is absolutely the family piece, but then it's also us as individuals.
Yeah.
We're all individual stewards of our own palaces, our empires that we're building, but absolutely we should be working interdependently as well. And that's something that it absolutely does take a lot of time and consistency, right? Because we want to help people understand these conversations and do so at a very high level. And when that understanding is there, they can then transfer that, right? Because until you really understand something, it's very hard to communicate it to other people very effectively.
That's why you need a system and a model. Which is why we're sharing this document with other people, listening to this podcast, going through our wealth seminars, our IBC resources. And I wanted to touch on something else you just said, because we've seen it in our own family. I've seen it on Diane's side. I've seen it on our side when a family member has passed away and suddenly the relationships turn on a dime. And it's almost like people become feral when there's money involved. It's dangerous, but it's not the money that was the problem. It's your relationship with money and how you view that. Money's, like you said, nothing more than a tool, but money gets this bad reputation, and one of the things I've always believed in is that, money belongs at the dinner table. Like, that's a conversation that needs to exist at the family level so everyone understands what it is and what it's not. And if the relationships aren't there, the education and the awareness around money is not there, of course people are going to fight over it. They don't understand what it is, what it can be used for. And so if there was no work done before the work, when a bunch of money hits your table, that's when relationships are burned, ruined, because they fight over it. And this is why having a future family letter is so vital to keeping those relationships healthy through education, awareness. And, it makes me think of Dave Ramsey, because I like a lot of things that he teaches. I honestly do. But one of the things I disagree with him on strongly is people will call in and be like, hey, my brother or so wants to buy a vehicle. Should I loan him money? And he's like, absolutely not. It's always an ultimatum. No, you do not do that because money harms relationships. And what I would say is, yeah, it will if there's no education, awareness, contract, or relationship in place. Right. Those are the pieces missing that conversation. Do you loan money to family? Yes, I do all the time. Guess what it's done to me and my relationship? It's strengthened my relationship with other members in the family. They know they can come to someone that they know, like, and trust, that'll treat them fairly, with good contracts in place, with me pouring education into them. So for instance, when a family member comes to borrow money to buy a car from me, I have them read Becoming Your Own Banker. I show them an amortization schedule, how to calculate the interest. So I'm investing into their education and their awareness. There's a contract in place. If you're late, there's interest. If you're late too many times, you miss payments, I'm coming to get the car. You understand this? You'd rather deal with me than deal with a bank. I can guarantee that.
Absolutely.
This isn't some handshake deal we're doing, but that's how money is treated in most families, which is why a guy like Dave Ramsey will say, don't ever do it. And he's right. Don't do it unless the education, the awareness, the contracts are there, the values are there, the relationship is there. See, money has had the exact opposite effect on our family, Joe, than it has for most Americans out there. Our family is now stronger together because we spent years having this conversation. Do you know what we're going to be able to do 30, 40 years from now? It's unreal. The amount of wealth that's being created right now. We already have all the vehicles taken care of in our family banking system. Next thing on the list is going to be mortgages. Imagine your kids growing up saying, I don't need Fannie Mae or Freddie. I don't need any government sponsored program. We got a family banking system. It's all private. It's all built on relationships. We've got principles. there's a lot riding on the shoulders of the future Fullers because of what we're building. They're going to grow into that conversation and say, man, my Uncle Joe really set us up. We need to honor that. This is an honor to be a Fuller going forward. Look at what our family's doing. Now, we're both givers too. So that's the fun part about having a lot of money, is it enhances every area of life. And when you're living that way, that's when you wake up every single day and you love every second of every day, when there's abundance in all areas. Now, here's the reality. And we'll wrap up this conversation with this. You and I, Joe, will never be Rockefellers or have Rockefeller type wealth. It cannot be done in one generation. It's just not possible. You know, people that think the Forbes top 100 list are the wealthiest people in the world, it's absolutely wrong. There are private banking families out there that stay so private. No one really knows how much money they have. But you have to understand, they understand that flow of money better than anyone else. And that type of wealth does not get built in one generation. And so we will never be a Rockefeller, that type of wealth. But what we can do is be a Rockefeller type in our own families or our own communities. Someone that will look back at our lives and say, wow, those guys shifted the entire economic model for our family for generations to come. That can happen in one generation, and it is. Isn't that the coolest idea?
And it absolutely is. And I think it does come back to Nelson Nash's book, right? Becoming Your Own Banker. He talks about that long range thinking, because this will absolutely surpass you or I at some point in our lives. This is Kyle and Joe planning for multiple generations to enjoy these gifts. And I think that's just such a different mindset than most of the population has, is because these things are absolutely going to happen, but it does require that long range thinking. So our mindset and our feelings now have to be in line with that future goal, or else it won't happen, right? And it's up to us to really create that environment for our family to operate in, because if they have a strong enough environment and perspective on money, they will absolutely take that into the future with them.
They can invest earlier into their unique abilities. And I think that's something everyone wishes they would have had that opportunity to do earlier in life. You know, if I could have discovered or have more resources to invest in my unique abilities earlier, everyone would have taken that chance. And, you know, it's an honor that I love being the person that's building this, right? And you do too. That's why we're doing this. Those are natural abilities of most leaders, is they're okay being the outsider for a time before everyone realizes what they're doing. And then they come into that conversation. Not everyone, I think, is blessed with those unique abilities, and we love being those individuals. But what even excites me more than what we're building here is, you know, we both believe in God. And, you know, I look at my 3 boys. You don't have kids yet, but you will. And I'm like, as good as I think you and I are, because I do think we're good dudes, I think our kids were saved for this particular time. Things are crazy, are they not?
Absolutely, they are.
It's wild. And one thing I believe is that we need more good people in this world with as many resources as possible. Like, we have to do that. So we're doing it for our family. And what gets me so excited is there's going to be future Fullers born that are 10 times the leaders that you and I are right now. Isn't that cool?
That is.
There's a compound effect to that too. And imagine preparing those leaders with all the resources they could ever fathom. Holy moly, what a calling for you and I to be building this. But it's why you can't just build the wealth. $100 million, $500 million can be squandered in one generation. We see it all the time.
All the time.
It's a worldwide phenomena. What you have to attach that with is a document. Call it whatever you want. We called it the Future Family Letter because it is a letter written for the future generations of the Fullers that will know exactly how this wealth was built, what our principles are. It's very similar to what the U.S. Constitution has done for America, right? There's a document that we need to rely on and work into and grow into, that the future generations will know this is why we have so much prosperity in our family. So we hope you enjoyed this episode today. This is one of our all-time favorite conversations. Anything with family banking just gets me all excited. I like to talk about it all day, every day. And so make sure you're hopping onto our website, get our resources on infinite banking, request a copy of this Future Family Letter. We'll send it to you. So, and make sure you're tying into our future wealth seminars as well, where we talk about this for hours on end with actual implementation, because the education's great, but unless we're willing to implement it, it's all for nothing. So make sure that you are subscribing so you get future episodes that are coming out after this one, and make sure you're tying in to get all the additional resources we have here at Factum.